Welcome to the Everyday Mom Challenge and part two of the ROC test for your dissertation tips. I hope that this can guide you through the process. Right now we're working on O. O is for originality and organization. So the question you need to ask yourself is your problem, is your research topic original, fresh, and does it build on the scientific research that's already out in the field? Now, y'all, this is a gap, and I'm telling you, we really need to park it here and do this whole video on the gap because this is where I see students struggling the most. So I've been working with students from different universities, and so it's not just one issue that I'm finding in one population of students. My concern is that with this not being solidified early on, you are going to run into roadblock after roadblock, and you are going to be at this crossroads. You're not going to be able to move forward until you have your gap. So what is the gap? All right, now I'm saying you've got to be original, but that is tricky because that makes you think automatically you can go out and come up with an original research idea and create a whole data collection off of that and move forward. No. You have to find articles that have already been published that are peer reviewed within the last 5 years. Now, and I'm going to warn you on that one too in a minute. And you need at least 5 of them. When I say at least, you need at least 5 as a minimum that have a gap specifically stated in the area of the research article that says further recommendations of study or limitations in the research. You know those sections in the back of the research articles? Those last pretty much 2 sections that's near your conclusion, that's where you're going to find your gap. Now, I've done a whole video session on how to find the gap. I pull up research articles and I show you specifically where they are located. If you get this under control now, every time you pull up a research article, you're going to be able to specifically say, this is the gap, this is what this person found. And you'll say, oh, this is a gap article, or no, this is just a background information for my chapter 2, which is going to be just what's out there in the field. So I'm telling you within the last 3 to 5 years because it needs to be fresh. But you better be careful with the 5-year research because you need to think about what is your graduation year and when are you going to be defending your research. So many universities might say that you have to have articles within the last 3 years. Now, I worked with a student through Monarch Educational Services who did not have a guideline for gap. It was just find the gap. There was no specific year with that. So check with your chair because this, I think, is important for you. With there not being a limitation on the time period, this student was able to pull back bunches of research. Me, on the other hand, I did a 3 to 5 year window, but I was still able to find, a lot of gap articles. When you find your articles, what do? You find one, you get excited, but that's not it. Go to their reference pages of that article because they might have got their gap from somewhere else. Look at the dates and start looking up some of the people that they cited. But I also, because they could have said similar things in their limitations or their conclusions or recommendations for further study. But I would encourage you to really, every time you pull up an article, go straight there for the gap, then work backwards. Because if you find a gap, you put it straight into your Google Drive, you put it straight in your organizational tips that I'm telling you to build folders, and you call it your gap folder. And y'all, I even capitalized GAP because it was like, this is it, y'all. This is the hardest. Please back up your research. And it has to build on scientific research that's peer-reviewed, that's already out there in the field. So once you find the gap, you have to turn it into a fresh new problem statement, a fresh new concept, but it builds on that original work. That's huge. I'm telling you. Look at those videos on how to find the gap. So, what is the C? Now, here are some questions that I want you to ask yourself. And if my time runs out, I want you to just pause this slide. I'm really going to talk about, does it count with other people? And have you talked it out? So, what I did is I knew that I could not use my personal church because that would be a conflict of interest. So, I set up a meeting with my pastor, and he pulled it. My husband went with me. We pulled in another pastor from the church that was in his doctorate program, and they just talked it out with me. And I was really paying attention to the behavioral responses, the patterns, what they were saying back. Were they seeing this too in the field, or had they talked with other pastors about this? Because I wanted to work with single moms. I wanted to see, would it even count? Would this research even matter? And I was getting some real applications. I was getting some great advice. I was already getting some contacts. It was just amazing. And I will be honest with you, my confidence level was a little low before I went in and talked with the pastor, and I was nervous. And my husband went with me as a sign of support. And then I would be able to talk it out with my husband at home. I didn't want to just walk in there with my journal book, which I did have, but I wanted to have my partner there with me so that way I could continue to talk it out with him, and maybe he remembered something that was key that I didn't. But you really have to be able to talk it out with other people and not just your family members. And that causes us to sometimes get out of our comfort zone. But you need to do this early on. So you find your gaps, talking it out with people is your next step. Because just because you found your gap, if you're the only person that's passionate about it and you talk to people and they don't see a need for that, it might be difficult for you to move forward because it might not actually contribute to work that's there in the field. But you also need to be able to communicate your work. And I think by talking it out, that talk aloud, that is the best way to build up your confidence. When I went in there, I was completely like a nervous wreck. When I walked out of that meeting, man, I could talk about single moms. I could talk about religious practices. I could talk about well-being. I had read so much research, watched so much YouTube, read books. Y'all, this is no joke. The way that you articulate your dissertation will grow over time. And at the beginning, you're a little rocky with it. I was. But the more that you spend time in the work, it's like it becomes an extension of your thought process of who you are. And you have this cognitive shift. And it's not just what you know about this topic, it's your living in this topic because it's your personal vision. It's what you see as a passion of yours. And how can you carry that out in your future? The best thing to do is to talk it now. So communicate it, connect with people in the field. Listen, you need to start contacting professors. And I know that you think that that's a little weird, but go on to their college websites. They're professors, they have office hours. They love this stuff, guys. That's their field of study. And they love to talk with other researchers. And they love to really support students. You don't know how awesome it was. Honestly, I felt like a superstar, a rock star, when I received emails back from Dr. Seligman, who is like the guru at positive psychology. It just warmed my heart when then he connected me with someone else in the field that I could also build a relationship with. And they even shared with me some of their research, asked me to read over it. It helps build this collective team spirit. So you've got to connect with people. And maybe we're researchers and I'm a little nerdy and isolated and I'm not an extrovert. I'm very introverted. Connecting with people helped to build my confidence and showed me that my work really did count in the grand scheme of things.